It was a calm Monday morning at City Hospital. The usual hustle and bustle filled the hallways, doctors making their rounds, nurses checking in on patients, and the quiet hum of machines that kept lives steady. Dr. Evelyn Hart, one of the hospital's most experienced pulmonologists, was in her office reviewing patient charts. She adjusted her glasses and sipped her lukewarm coffee, preparing for the busy day ahead. The sun streamed through the windows, casting a warm light across the sterile walls. Everything felt routine, peaceful even. But as in any bustling hospital, routine can shift in an instant. That morning, a group of police officers arrived unexpectedly. They weren't there for a serious emergency or a major incident. No, they were there with their K-9 unit for a community demonstration, a way to engage with the public and show off the skills of their highly trained dogs. Officers with broad smiles entered the lobby, shaking hands with staff members, while their K-9s, sleek and alert, trotted alongside. Dr. Hart didn't think much of it at first. After all, the hospital had hosted similar demonstrations before. But something felt different this time. Rex, the German shepherd, stood out in the crowd. He was large, imposing, yet his eyes had a quiet intensity that seemed to demand attention. He didn't bark like most dogs. Instead, he watched everyone carefully, assessing the surroundings. Dr. Hart had seen her share of working dogs during her career, but Rex had an air of confidence that was almost unnerving. The demonstration began as planned. The officers showcased how the dogs could respond to commands, find hidden objects, and even apprehend suspects. Dr. Hart couldn't help but be impressed by the precision of their movements. However, she wasn't there to watch the demonstration for long. Just as the event was wrapping up, an urgent call echoed through the hospital's overhead speakers. Code blue in ICU emergency, oxygen line failure. Dr. Hart's heart skipped a beat. She immediately stood up, grabbing her medical bag, and rushed out of her office. The oxygen line was vital for several patients, and any interruption could cause a catastrophe. As she sprinted down the hallway, she had no idea what was waiting ahead and how quickly everything would spiral out of control. Dr. Hart's footsteps echoed through the sterile hallways of City Hospital as she dashed toward the ICU. Her mind raced. An oxygen line failure meant a patient's life could be at risk. It wasn't just any malfunction. The hospital's ICU was equipped with highly sensitive patients relying on their oxygen support for survival. A disruption could lead to critical complications or worse. She could already feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her shoulders. As she approached the ICU, she could hear the clattering of nurses and the frantic voices of medical staff. The door to the ICU swung open just as she arrived, and Dr. Hart was met with a scene of controlled chaos. The small oxygen tank in the corner was visibly damaged, its tube twisted and disconnected from the patient's mask, which was lying uselessly on the floor. The patient, a middle-aged man with severe respiratory issues, was struggling to breathe, his chest rising and falling in short, desperate gasps. Dr. Hart immediately assessed the situation. Her first priority was stabilizing the patient and getting the oxygen flowing again. She motioned for the nurses to help her move the patient into a more comfortable position, all while securing a backup oxygen supply. Her calm demeanor reassured the team, and they quickly sprang into action. But then came the sound that would forever change the course of that morning, a loud bark, followed by a sharp thud. Dr. Hart's concentration snapped, and she instinctively turned toward the source of the noise. Rex, the K-9 from earlier, was standing near the ICU doorway, his body stiff and alert. The police officers who had come with him were trying to calm him down, but it was clear that something wasn't quite right. The dog's ears were pricked, his eyes focused intently on the scene in front of him. Before Dr. Hart could react, Rex lunged forward, moving so quickly that there was barely time to process what had happened. The dog wasn't barking anymore. Instead, he was in full protective mode. His teeth sank into the sleeve of Dr. Hart's white coat, and instinctively, she pulled her arm back, but it was too late. A sharp pain shot through her arm as the dog's bite made contact. The room froze. Nurses gasped. The officers rushed to pull Rex away, and for a brief moment, the world seemed to stand still. Dr. Hart's breath caught in her throat, not from the pain, but from the shock of the unexpected attack. She stood frozen for a moment, staring down at the dog's grip on her coat, but then, as if snapping out of a trance, she composed herself and took a deep breath. She couldn't let fear take over, not now. Dr. Hart's mind raced, but her body remained still, her breath steady despite the sharp sting of pain in her arm. Rex, the canine, had locked onto her with such precision and force that it was impossible for her to pull away in time. His powerful jaws had already sunk into her sleeve, leaving a deep imprint on her arm, though the bite itself wasn't as severe as it felt. Still, it was a painful and startling reminder of the chaos unfolding around her. The room was frozen in disbelief. Nurses and doctors stood in stunned silence, eyes wide in shock. Officers who had been so calm just moments ago were now frantically trying to regain control of Rex, who seemed confused and unsettled. Dr. Hart could hear the dog's low growl, his hackles raised, and despite her pain, she immediately recognized that this wasn't an act of aggression, it was simply instinct. The officers, realizing the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control, rushed forward to pull Rex back. One officer, Sergeant Matthews, called out to his canine partner in a commanding voice, trying to break the dog's focus. "Rex, heel," he shouted, but the dog, still in protective mode, didn't seem to hear him at first. Dr. Hart could feel her pulse quicken, her arm aching where the dog's teeth had just grazed her. Yet, despite the pain, a strange calmness began to take over. She knew she had to remain composed, not just for her own sake, but for the sake of everyone around her. She didn't want panic to consume the room, especially with a patient still in need of urgent care. "Officer," Dr. Hart spoke firmly, her voice steady but with a hint of urgency, "get him away from me. I'm fine, just get him back." Sergeant Matthews was already moving toward her, his hands outstretched, trying to reassure both Rex and Dr. Hart. "Rex, it's okay," he murmured, a soft but commanding voice that had worked on the dog before. Slowly and with visible reluctance, Rex backed away. His eyes, full of confusion and uncertainty, met Dr. Hart's for a fleeting moment before he finally obeyed. Dr. Hart, now free from the dog's grip, took a deep breath, wiping the beads of sweat that had formed on her forehead. The officers immediately began apologizing, one by one. "I'm so sorry," Dr. Hart. "This isn't how it was supposed to go," Sergeant Matthews said, his voice heavy with regret. But Dr. Hart, ever composed, offered him a reassuring smile. "It's okay. He's just doing his job," she replied, though the words felt hollow in her mouth. She wasn't upset, but something was beginning to stir inside her. This incident, it wasn't over yet. The room was thick with silence, an almost suffocating stillness that followed the brief but intense moment of chaos. Dr. Hart stood there, her arm aching, but the situation was still far from resolved. Officers and medical staff alike were staring at her, unsure of what to say or do next. The stark contrast between the urgency of the patient in the bed and the shock of the canine incident hung heavily in the air. But Dr. Hart's focus never wavered. The patient. She had to focus on the patient. Slowly, as though nothing had happened, she turned back to the bed where the man struggled to breathe. The oxygen tube had been reconnected, but the damage to the equipment had triggered an emergency shutdown. Time was of the essence. "Everyone, let's move fast. We need to stabilize him now," she called out in a voice that was clear and commanding, snapping the staff out of their stunned trance. As the nurses and doctors moved into action, Dr. Hart glanced briefly at her arm, now marked with a deep red line from the dog's bite. Blood had begun to soak through the white sleeve of her coat, but she barely registered the pain anymore. The urgency of the situation took over. Sergeant Matthews, still near Rex, glanced over at Dr. Hart, clearly unsure if he should approach her. He'd seen officers get frustrated or angry after incidents like this, especially when medical personnel were involved. But Dr. Hart's calm demeanor was entirely different. She was neither angry nor upset. She was just focused. Her eyes were locked on the patient, her movements measured and confident as she coordinated the resumption of the oxygen therapy. As the minutes ticked by, Dr. Hart continued to direct the team. She moved with precision, her professional instincts guiding her every move. Her colleagues respected her immensely for her skill, but today they were seeing something else in her. Her poise in the face of the unexpected, her ability to remain unshaken in the middle of such chaos, was nothing short of extraordinary. And then something unexpected happened. Without a word, one of the officers stepped forward, his face showing a mix of guilt and admiration. "Dr. Hart," he said, his voice hesitant, "I'm so sorry about what happened. This wasn't Rex's fault. He was just reacting. But I can't imagine how you're handling all this right now." Dr. Hart turned to face him, meeting his gaze with a calm that startled everyone in the room. "It's all right," she said softly, her voice steady. "He did what he was trained to do. And now, we just need to make sure we do our jobs." Her words were simple, but in that moment, they seemed to resonate with everyone present. There was no anger, no blame, just a calm resolve that held the room together. With the immediate crisis under control, Dr. Hart allowed herself a brief moment to breathe. The patient's oxygen levels were stabilizing, and the team had managed to reconnect the life-saving equipment. The tension in the ICU room began to ease, but there was another matter at hand: the dog bite. Dr. Hart glanced down at her arm, now clearly marked by Rex's teeth. Blood had soaked through her sleeve, and the pain, while manageable, still throbbed. She took a steadying breath, unwilling to let the injury distract her from the task at hand. Her colleagues had already seen to the patient, but now it was time to address the elephant in the room. Sergeant Matthews, his face still full of regret, approached Dr. Hart cautiously. He hesitated for a moment, as though unsure of what to say. "Dr. Hart, He started, then paused. "I just want to say how sorry I am. This was completely unintentional. Rex, he's just doing his job, but we should have kept him away from you." Dr. Hart looked up at him, her expression calm. "I understand," she replied softly, her voice steady. "I'm not angry with Rex. It was an accident. He was just doing what he was trained to do." She spoke with such conviction that the officer was visibly relieved. Nurses quickly brought over a first aid kit, and Dr. Hart, despite the pain, continued to reassure everyone. "It's nothing serious," she said, unwrapping her sleeve carefully. "A little bit of a bite, but I'll be fine. Focus on the patient." She didn't want to make a scene. Her priority was the safety and well-being of those around her. However, there was no denying that the incident with Rex had shaken everyone. The entire room had witnessed the sudden shift from routine to chaos, and for a moment, it felt as though nothing was certain anymore. It wasn't just a medical emergency, it was a reminder of how unpredictable life could be. As the nurses cleaned her wound, Dr. Hart's thoughts began to drift. There had to be a better way for the medical and police teams to work together. This incident wasn't Rex's fault. It was a misunderstanding, a collision of instincts. But it wasn't just Rex who was affected. The hospital staff, the officers, and even the patients had been thrown off course. "I think we need to rethink how we handle situations like this," Dr. Hart muttered under her breath, more to herself than anyone else. The thought lingered in her mind, a seed planted. She wasn't sure what the solution would be, but something had to change. And perhaps, just perhaps, this was the moment that could spark that change. As the nurses finished tending to Dr. Hart's wound, a sense of calm began to return to the ICU. The patient, now stable, was breathing steadily with the help of the newly connected oxygen supply. The team was beginning to feel the relief of having prevented a more serious crisis, but the tension from the earlier incident with Rex still hung in the air. Dr. Hart, still seated by the bed, glanced down at her arm. The bite from the police dog had left a mark, but it was nothing she hadn't seen before in her long career. She would be fine, but the situation had made her realize something she hadn't fully considered before. There was a disconnect between the worlds of medical professionals and law enforcement. What had happened here was a perfect example of how those worlds could collide, and in the process, cause harm that could have been avoided. As if sensing her thoughts, Sergeant Matthews approached her cautiously. He had been standing in the doorway, watching Dr. Hart as she calmly gave orders to her team and spoke to her patient. There was a look of genuine concern on his face as he walked toward her. Dr. Hart, he began, his voice soft but earnest. I just want to say again how sorry I am about what happened. Rex has been with me for years, but he's never reacted like that before. I should have known better than to bring him in here while you were working. Dr. Hart looked up, meeting his gaze. Despite the tension of the situation, she smiled slightly. Sergeant, it's not your fault. It was an accident. Rex was just doing his job. But it wasn't supposed to happen like that, he insisted. He's supposed to be trained to be calm in all situations. But today, I don't know what happened. Dr. Hart nodded thoughtfully. I think Rex was reacting to the sudden movements. You know, when you're in an ICU, things are unpredictable, and it's hard to anticipate what's going to happen next. I'm not blaming him. She paused, feeling an unexpected wave of sympathy for the officer. He was just trying to protect, and it turned into something he couldn't control. The officer's face softened, and he hesitated before speaking again. You're right. It's just hard to see it that way, especially when someone gets hurt. Dr. Hart, ever the professional, extended her uninjured hand toward the officer. It's okay. What matters now is that we learn from this. We can't change what happened, but we can make sure it doesn't happen again. Maybe we should think about how we can work together in situations like this. For the first time since the incident, Sergeant Matthews looked relieved. I'd like that, he said, shaking her hand. Maybe we can figure out a way to train both our teams, yours and mine, so that these kinds of accidents don't happen again. Dr. Hart nodded. That sounds like a good idea. As their eyes met, a moment of understanding passed between them. Neither of them could change what had happened, but they could work together to ensure something like this wouldn't occur again. It was the beginning of something new, an unlikely bond between two worlds, both dedicated to protecting others. In the days that followed the incident, Dr. Hart's thoughts continued to revolve around the conversation she had with Sergeant Matthews. It wasn't just about the bite. It wasn't even just about the patient that was saved. What had really struck her was the realization that there had to be a better way to integrate law enforcement and medical teams. The misunderstanding with Rex had been an unfortunate accident, but it had highlighted a significant gap in communication and training between the two fields. Dr. Hart knew that if this situation wasn't addressed, future incidents could arise, and it would be harder to explain away accidents like this. The thought kept her awake at night, but it also sparked something within her, a desire to turn this chaotic event into something more productive, something that could benefit not only the hospital, but the entire community. A few weeks later, Dr. Hart found herself in a meeting with hospital administrators, local law enforcement, and the police K-9 unit. She had gathered a diverse group of professionals: paramedics, doctors, nurses, police officers, and dog handlers, all ready to discuss what could be done differently in the future. The room was filled with a mix of skepticism, curiosity, and hope. No one was quite sure what to expect, but they all knew one thing for certain: something needed to change. Thank you for meeting with me today, Dr. Hart began, standing at the front of the room. Her tone was calm but firm, carrying the weight of the incident and the importance of what they were about to discuss. What happened that day wasn't anyone's fault, but it was a wake-up call, a moment that showed us how critical it is to be prepared for the unexpected. Our two fields, medicine and law enforcement, need to work more closely together. The room was quiet, everyone listening intently. Sergeant Matthews, who had been sitting quietly in the back, raised his hand. I've been thinking a lot about what happened too, and I agree. Our K-9 units are trained to do specific jobs, but we don't always consider the environment we're bringing them into. In a hospital, there are high-pressure situations and unknown variables. We need to find a way to make sure our dogs, as well as our officers, are equipped to handle those kinds of environments. Dr. Hart nodded, appreciative of the officer's honesty. Exactly. That's why I propose a joint training program. We could train our medical teams to understand K-9 behavior better and vice versa. Maybe even create a system where we can safely integrate canine units into hospital settings when necessary, without creating any risk to staff or patients. There was a murmur of agreement from the room. The idea was gaining traction, and Dr. Hart could sense the momentum building. What had started as a single moment of chaos had now become the foundation for something meaningful. This wasn't just about preventing another bite. This was about creating an ongoing, collaborative effort between medical professionals and law enforcement, an effort to keep both the community and the first responders safe. The weeks that followed the meeting marked the beginning of a new chapter for both City Hospital and the local police force. Dr. Hart's proposal for joint training between medical staff and law enforcement had been met with enthusiasm, and plans quickly began to take shape. The hospital administrators were fully on board, understanding the importance of improving safety protocols, especially when it came to interactions with police canines in high-stress environments like hospitals. The first step was organizing a pilot program. Sergeant Matthews, who had become a key figure in the project, worked closely with Dr. Hart and the hospital's medical team. Together, they coordinated specialized training sessions for both officers and hospital personnel. The focus was on improving understanding of canine behavior, recognizing signs of stress or agitation in the dogs, and learning how to safely interact with them in environments that were anything but typical. The training sessions were an eye-opening experience for everyone involved. Doctors and nurses, who had only seen police dogs in action from a distance, were now learning the subtle cues that indicated when a dog was becoming overstimulated or confused. On the other hand, police officers were given insight into the fast-paced, high-pressure world of a hospital, helping them understand the unpredictable nature of medical emergencies. Rex, the dog involved in the incident with Dr. Hart, became an unexpected symbol of the program's success. During one of the training sessions, he was introduced to the staff once again. This time, however, there was no confusion or fear. Dr. Hart, having fully recovered from the bite, stepped forward to help demonstrate the new techniques she and the officers have learned. Rex responded calmly, his movements controlled and measured as he interacted with the team. It was a testament to the progress made, and the room was filled with a sense of accomplishment. Dr. Hart couldn't help but feel a sense of pride as she watched the program unfold. The initial crisis, which had left her with a deep wound and a sense of uncertainty, had now become the catalyst for a significant change. What had once been a tense, chaotic moment was now the foundation for a new level of cooperation between the medical and law enforcement communities. As the program continued to grow, it became clear that this collaboration was not just a response to a single incident. It was a forward-thinking initiative designed to protect the community in ways that had never been explored before. And in that shared effort, Dr. Hart found a renewed sense of purpose. The worlds of medicine and law enforcement had collided, but in the end, they had created something far greater than either could have achieved alone.